Welcome to this episode of Video Shaman. I am Alex Lipton. I'm here with John Allen, and we've got a good show for you today. It's going to be a personal show with one of our passionate subjects, namely filmmaking, and one of our favorite film directors, Darren Aronofsky. But first, just to bring up the Isumata consciousness of holding the sacred space where wisdom can be revealed. Something that we want to do here is to, in light of, or in lieu of the, it's not in light of the situation, because it's definitely a dark situation with Las Vegas and what happened there. Definitely want to hold the space for healing and wisdom to be revealed in this situation, because it's hard to make sense of a situation that doesn't make any sense. And sometimes it's okay for things to not make sense, because I don't know how this makes sense. Like, we were both talking about this before, but I just wanted to give an honor to that situation and introduce my Duke of Duke of Scripts, potentially, could be probably getting promoted here soon, John Allen.
Thank you, Alex. Wonderful introduction. Duke of Scripts. I'll take that title for now, but I definitely aspire to bigger things. So hoping for that promotion any day. But yeah, that was a rough week, a rough past couple of days with the Vegas shooting and all that stuff. And I liked how you put that. Like, sometimes you don't have to figure out why something's happening or what to do. It's just like, sometimes shit is real fucked up. And yeah, don't let it spiral you down into negativity, but sometimes it's okay to just be like lost in wonder and chaos in this world, because that doesn't make sense to me either. I don't know how or why, but yeah, so keeping that in mind. Yeah, keep those people in our thoughts, but some wild times we live in, and that wasn't the only thing that happened this last couple of days. We also lost Tom Petty. So yeah, a lot of weird emotions happening right now. So,
and to have this all coincide with seeing the movie Mother. It's not exactly like the movie you go see to escape your problems or escape the horrors of the world, because for all those listening in, they're most likely, I'll just go out on a limb here and say there's going to be spoiler alerts, level spoiler alert, lower third, maybe a full crazy text graphic here, but definitely an insane movie, and I think it resonated a lot with just the insanity of what's going on in the world here, and we can get into that here, but first I have to let my dog Isabel in. Hold on one second.
Okay. Oh, that's perfect. You've been planning that?
Oh yeah, Chris.
Oh, fucking Chris.
Keeping it simple. I think I'm just gonna keep him in the background the whole time from now on.
Yeah. He looks like a demon, but a friendly demon.
Pretty sure we were tripping when this happened.
That looks like the face I remember. That's for sure. He knows too much.
He knows too much. Yeah. So, Darren Aronofsky. When was the first time? When did you see them in order? Because he had the first movie he was known for was Pi, and then Requiem for a Dream. What was your experience coming across Darren Aronofsky, or even his films? How did you see those movies?
I had heard of Pi, but I had not seen it. And then I saw Requiem for a Dream, I think, in high school, with the preface, like, I assume you're not going to like it, because it's just anybody telling anybody to watch that movie, they're not going to give like, oh, you're going to love it. It's going to be a heartwarming experience for you. So this person told me, like, yeah, you're probably not going to like it. But then I did like it, like, a lot. So that was the first Darren Aronofsky experience I had. I didn't really know anything about him, so I didn't like take notice that I wasn't super into film at that point yet. I loved movies, but I wasn't like analyzing them and thinking about them differently yet. So I liked Requiem for a Dream, and then right when I moved out to Los Angeles, before we met, like, The Fountain came out right in 2007. And I think that was part of another aspect of our getting to know each other and forming a friendship is because we had both just seen this movie, The Fountain, that I was told to see by one of my teachers. So then from The Fountain on, while being in film school, that was what spiraled me and helped me learn about Darren Aronofsky. And then I think eventually I went back and watched Pi, and I bought Pi on DVD. So I've seen that once, I think. I think that was all I could get through, barely, was one time. So yeah, and then from then on, I've seen all the rest of them in the theater: Black Swan, The Wrestler, Noah, and then Mother last night I saw. So yeah, it's been a hell of an experience. Did you see them chronologically, or did you see Requiem in the theater? I remember that was like
Yeah,
I think, or maybe 2000 when it came out.
yeah, I definitely didn't see it in theaters. It was one of those movies. I was working at, it was the one of the two sort of standard retail like jobs that I had was when I was in high school. I worked at this video store called Suncoast Video, and that was really cool because I could get discount on DVDs. So I would just, like, in between customers, just kind of walk around and look at movies. And honestly, I can't remember if that's how I found Requiem, or someone probably told me about it, and I either bought it and then just watched it. But Requiem was the first one I saw, and that definitely influenced my approach to, like, wanting to make movies. I really just love the editing and the style of the movie, but it's like, you know, also it was definitely coincided with, okay, I got a funny story about this actually. But coincided with when I was smoking weed for the first time. So, like, you know, obviously it's about heroin and horrible addictions, and but the first part of the movie is a little bit lighter, and they're smoking weed and stuff, and those really cool, quick editing, you know, jump cuts of them, like, getting high and shit. That was like, you know, I would like to, you know, get high to that shit, basically. But it was always a thing where you could enjoy the first part of the movie, and then as you watch the movie, things deteriorate really fast. And, like, there have been many times where I would get high, watch that movie, and fall asleep, and just wake up in the middle of the ending as, like, everything's falling apart, and his arm is all infected, and, like, yes, Tess. And it was just like, I'd have, like, awful, I would go to sleep and wake up, like, with the DVD menu playing. Like, that DVD menu was just, is burned into my mind, like, looping over and over. But the funny story I wanted to tell with that, this is before I really knew what a blunt was. And there's the part where, which Wayans is it? Damon Wayans or?
I think it's Marlon.
Marlon Wayans? Okay. There's the scene where he rolls a blunt in the same editing fashion, and he's, like, with the mirror, and he's, like, pushing the mirror. He's like, wow, this mirror is really cool, man. I didn't know that a blunt was a cigar wrapper, basically, with weed in it. What I thought was that I thought it was like a paper bag. So I cut, like, a piece of paper bag and actually rolled weed, like, tried to smoke, like, a full blunt of paper bag rolled weed.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah. I was like, I got sick and lightheaded, obviously, and I, like, sat down. I remember I was up in my parents' bedroom this is before my mom knew I smoked weed. And I passed out and then woke up afterwards, and I went downstairs to, like, make a sandwich. And next thing I know, I'm just, like, on the floor, and my mom is, like, freaking out. And she's like, oh my God, you had a seizure. And I'm like, what happened? Long story short, I passed out because, like, I fucking smoked a paper bag, you know. She flushed all my weed, and it was like a, you know, kind of an embarrassing situation, to say the least. But I remember that. It was Requiem for a Dream. I'm like, oh yeah, so this is okay. So this is what people do. I'm like, I'll go get a paper bag.
Well, I guess that's better than you going up and picking out a heroin habit on the street. Smoking paper bags is probably a little bit better.
Yeah, I guess so. That is definitely a silver lining to that.
There are much worse things you could have picked up from that movie, like 10 worse things probably. So
yeah. But
then you've learned what a blunt is.
Oh, since then I don't smoke paper bags anymore. I totally I went to rehab and got my. I don't even, like, I see a paper bag and I just, like, look the other way, just keep walking.
Perfect. Yeah.
But yeah, and then I saw that, and I remember Mike Mayer. We were watching that with a bunch of other our friends. We'd all smoke and watch that. But then watching Pi, uh, that was the one where the DVD menu really got stuck in my head because that was just absolute insanity, you know. And you watched, especially both of those movies. They're really good movies, but like you said with Pi, you watch it like once. It's a great movie, but sometimes, you know, a great movie doesn't mean you want to go back and watch it again. Kind of jump forward to Mother. Like, I really liked Mother in a lot of ways. It struck me in some dark places and just really kind of really intense. But it's not a movie that I'm like jumping and itching to go see again right away, especially not in theaters. I'm not like, yeah, I need to understand this film. Like, I don't know if I want to.
Yeah, that one is definitely one that I will for sure not see in the theater again. And when I do see it again in whatever capacity, that will probably be the last time I see it if I watch it a second time. And same reason for you. It's not because I didn't like it. I liked it a lot. But it was just too much, like you were saying, like over just stimulation of all senses. Like I don't know what to think or feel or what I was seeing or what I was hearing. It was just too much. It was like a bad full body massage, like constantly, and it was somebody like poking your eyeballs the whole time, and then it's just too much. Yeah, too much. But yeah, great, very effective. Obviously, I think that was what part of what the goal was, is to make people feel that way. But yeah, I could go a while without seeing that one again. Whereas, as I've told you before, Requiem for a Dream, for whatever reason, I could watch over and over and over again. And I know part of that reason is because of Jennifer Connelly, who I'm very fond of. But the music is incredible. And obviously, I think it's probably more popular than the movie itself is the soundtrack of Requiem for a Dream. But that one I could watch over and over and over again. If I show up at somebody's house and they're in the middle of it, I'll sit down and watch it. You know, like I feel like some people feel like we feel about Mother. They feel that way about Requiem, because it is just a lot and scary and fucked up and like visceral and disgusting. But I guess it's up my alley somehow. Whereas Mother is just like too much for me to take on any level. So I can appreciate it, and I'll read more about it because it's really interesting to read about, hear other people's thoughts and analysis. But yeah, that I'm okay with not seeing that movie ever again, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I was talking about the same thing with Corey in that respect, because Corey is very much a Darren Aronofsky fan, but he's got, and this speaks a lot to Darren Aronofsky's style and the kinds of movies he makes. There's definitely a theme and common shooting styles, and there's common elements to all of them. But for example, a movie like Requiem for a Dream compared to The Fountain, that's where like a division I feel like happens. Specifically, you know, Corey says it's like, you know, he loves Requiem, but he hated The Fountain because The Fountain was a lot more cerebral. It was much more spiritual, a lot more abstract. It still had these Darren Aronofsky tones and elements to it, but comparably, like from the first movies he made, which were more independent, very much tapped into madness and insanity, and just had this like really visceral kind of like thing. And it definitely has a lot to do with, I think, what we would both agree on with Darren Aronofsky is one of the things that makes him as such a good director is his ability to elicit performances from actors. I think we watched, there was a behind the scenes like video clip of The Fountain where Hugh Jackman and Rachel Weisz were sitting backstage. I think they were like makeup artists were painting those black rings on his arm, and they're just sitting there just like tripping out about Darren Aronofsky and like the way that he is. Like I don't know, man. Like he just like gets in there. Like it just they were just going off talking about like the way Darren makes him feel. And as a aspiring future director, really here, that's like a really cool thing to look up to, is a way to communicate with actors in a way that brings out such a performance that, I mean, I think that's what a lot of people really like. I'm sure a lot of actors, like even Jennifer Lawrence and Javier Bardem, want to work with Darren because of his ability to bring performances out like that.
Well, right. Yeah. I mean, I think most people would argue that Jared Leto's never going to give as good of a performance in any movie ever as he did in Requiem for a Dream. And most people, same with Marlon Wayans. Like, it's just when you hear, maybe when you heard before that movie that was going to be the cast, you might be like, ugh, I don't know about this. But then seeing, the performances that he got out of them was exceptional. And like, some directors can just do that. Like, obviously Stanley Kubrick was very good at doing that, and it's notorious for how he just broke Shelley Duvall down, and it comes out in her performance. But in her interview, she said, like, even though she made him like cry and broke down her whole soul, she said it was one of the best experiences of her life, and she like infinitely thanks him for doing that. And you can clearly see it was effective for the movie. I'll never forget her terrified eyes, like running down the hallway with the knife, or wherever she is. But yeah, people who can get that out of actors and get them to a place where they're properly motivated is a very unique thing for a director to have. Like, you can have all the visions and all what it's going to look like and what it's going to sound like and all that stuff, but if you get poor performances out of actors, it's like, that's the whole movie, that's gone. And just because you get big names doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the big performances. You kind of gotta dig in there and find something and talk to them and get that character out of them, and not just like in a very surface, like, well, this character would do this and this character would do that. It's like, no, talk about their psyche and what they're going through and what their body language is, and their cadences and all this little stuff. And I'd like to add that Rachel Weisz at the time of The Fountain was also dating Darren Aronofsky, and right now Jennifer Lawrence is dating Darren Aronofsky. So that's
really? I didn't know that. No way.
Yeah, so that's a whole nother dynamic. So obviously they were speaking highly of him because they like all of him. But yeah, so
wow,
he's definitely an aspiring figure I have in film, and not just because of his style, but because of, like, he resurrected Mickey Rourke's career essentially with The Wrestler, and every performance he's gotten from anybody basically has been pretty stellar. And I haven't really read anything about people's perceptions of Jennifer Lawrence's performance in this movie. I think it's kind of overshadowed by, like, what the fuck. Basically, you can't not talk about anything but what's going on or what's not going on. But I think she did a great job, and I felt like, we were supposed to be her, and I think she represented how I felt very well, just confused, and everything she did, I felt like she was portraying it very, very, very well. So yeah, but that's just another reason why I don't want to watch it again, is because I felt, you feel what she's feeling, and it's just like, can't handle that.
Something, a little subtle thing about the movie that subconsciously or subliminally punctuates as an exclamation is the movie is called Mother, but there's an exclamation point at the end of Mother. And the movie opens up and it's, in script, it says Mother with an exclamation point, but then Mother goes out of focus and then there's just an exclamation point there. And I remember watching that in the beginning and being like, okay, here we go, Darren Aronofsky movie. And then it opens up with the woman in fire and everything. I'm like, holy shit, here we go. But like, fast forward to the end, that's like what people were so fucking up in arms about, and people walking out of theaters, and the end, the exclamation point. It's like, yeah, it's like this fucking last 10 minutes of the movie is the most brutal assault on your senses and everything you think you know or want to experience. And yeah, it's like, yeah, exactly. It was scary, man. It was scary. And like we were talking about before, when we were pre-gaming the show, the sound design in itself is a character. To be able to utilize the subtleties of, even in The Fountain, like when Hugh Jackman would go to put his finger up against the tree, or his finger like up against, or go to kiss Rachel Weisz's neck, and you could hear that static electricity kind of sound, and there was a lot of really great use of sound of that, and Mother was like no exception to that. Like, I'm glad that you knew exactly what I was talking about with Michelle Pfeiffer and her tequila glass or whatever, and the clinking of the ice was just like driving me nuts. And that that just reminded me of a time we were watching that movie Alice in Wonderland.
I knew you were going to bring that up. That's exactly what I was just thinking of.
That what the fuck? That was like a really like a foreign film version of Alice in Wonderland. The teeth of that like rabbit, like and like the girl running across those rocks,
the mounds of dirt. I think it was Russian. I'm not sure, and I think that was the guy behind you. He's the one who found it, I think, or at least I associated with him. Yeah, that was too much. You didn't need to be tripping to watch that movie. That movie made you trip, and it was because of the visceral fucking and all the little noises that were just like, oh, this makes me feel like dirty and scared, and like I'm just getting rocks pelted at me the whole time.
Yeah.
But I think Mother had an aspect of that because of the sound design. It would just put you there, put you more into the world. Instead of just seeing it, you kind of felt it all around you. Mm-hmm. Like you heard the house, you felt like you were in the house. And yeah, Michelle Pfeiffer's Ice Cubes and everyone walking on the wood floors. And then when stuff started, like the blood started going through the wood and you can like hear her poke it. And then there was a nice little Home Alone moment in the basement with the furnace down there that made me think of but like everything just sounded, so visceral. And that really, really did a lot to bring you, take you in and do bad things to you.
I was, before I kind of went off topic or went on a little tangent, but I brought up like Corey's feelings about Darren Aronofsky in the context of how his style has morphed and evolved and changed at times. He's got like a very spiritual, esoteric side of the way he tells the stories, but then he's also got this like really good way of tapping into the madness and insanity of just any given situation, whether it's addiction or even genius and insanity itself with Pi and just being schizophrenic, multiple personality, like in Black Swan. But that seemed to be like the divide where some people are really more like, I like the original Darren Aronofsky insanity stuff because that's like more gut wrenching, and like some people are not really into the like taking big leaps, and like obviously Darren Aronofsky has like a worldview that he wants to express in his movies, and I think a lot of people, including Corey, are not as drawn into and attracted to like what the introspective kind of, not saying he's not into introspective stuff, no offense, Corey, but just, you know what I mean, Corey, you don't like The Fountain. I'm just trying to highlight that as a thing. But in Mother, I feel like he was able to do the best of both worlds in that way. He had a very strong esoteric weird subtext that was clearly going on throughout the entire movie, but there was so much insanity going on that every time I tried to like dissect or figure out, make sense of what was happening, shit was escalating so much that I just okay, I think this is what this means, but like what the fuck, what does this, like maybe not, like what the hell does this mean? Darren Aronofsky's got like a very strong like sense of the biblical, Kabbalistic, mystical interpretation of events, like with the fountain and the tree of life, and especially with and Noah, telling this alternative history of the flood in a way that's different. And Mother, upon reflection, is very much like the Bible and Genesis and the creation of the world, and Jennifer Lawrence being Mother Earth, Javier Bardem being God, and just how like basically God fucked the earth and the earth and humanity was born and just came in and destroyed everything.
Yeah, bunch of kids that came in. That's what it seemed like. I mean, there wasn't really one redeeming person in the entire movie except for Mother Earth. Like everybody else just seemed completely ridiculous. So it definitely it was very, very strong in its, like the subtext almost wasn't subtext because it was so strong. It was the only thing that was there, really. There wasn't really a metaphor because it was like what the movie was about. It was like you can't really even see the movie as these people living in a real house. It's like, because it clearly wasn't that, so it wasn't even like you had to read into it more. It was just like, it was a movie that was so abstract, but but nothing, there really wasn't anything deep about it, even though it was so deep. You know, it was like, it's hard to articulate because it was so different than other movies that you go, especially like a blockbuster movie you go see. Like, yeah, I can see this movie being in like an art house thing, but it being presented as like a regular movie for everybody to see, I feel like that's why so many people were put off, because they're like, I usually don't see these kind of movies. Why did somebody trick me into seeing this
Yeah.
movie? Everyone's like, oh, Jennifer Lawrence, Javier Bardem, and the preview looked like it was kind of quirky. I don't really even know. But then you just got fucking duped, and it was just like, this is not normal. Like, I don't no comprendo. Why is this happening? Like, nothing makes sense. So there almost wasn't anything to read into it because it was all just so ridiculous and abstract. Like, they weren't trying to hide anything. Like, it didn't try to make it seem like, oh, is this girl kind of going insane? It's like, no, this is not normal. Nothing about it is normal. So I can't even begin. There's no point of reference for me to say what is happening, or like I can relate, or is this like a real story? Like, so everything is kind of thrown out the window from what you know as like a normal linear life, or some things that happen to you in our real lives. Like, nothing like that. And no one can compare to having a day like that or having a week like that. It's like, this doesn't make sense. So that was really interesting to me, and it's still making me think that there must be more to it, because I always want there to be more to it. But I think he honestly just either directly wrote like metaphors for the Bible and these old stories that he really likes, just telling the old stories. He literally just was like, okay, this is that. I'm translating. That's who this person represents. Okay, I'm writing this in here. This is Cain and Abel. Okay, I'm writing this in here. This is what happened here. This is the perfect representation of humanity. This is this person, or this is this religion. And so that was like too literal almost, because you could feel it, even though you couldn't like analyze it while you're watching it. You could feel like that everything. No person was a person. They were all representing an idea. So yeah, and then I'm just going in and reading a lot of stuff on the internet, which is either good and bad, but it's like there are a lot of theories out there about like this being how, like, a metaphor for how women are treated, because there's a very brutal scene of her getting called terrible names and beaten up and all
Oh
this
yeah, I
kind of
totally forgot about that
stuff.
until you brought that up, dude. When fucking getting
Yeah, so
punched and
yeah,
shit.
that was extremely brutal. So I mean, there could be, you could read into it however you want. But apparently Darren Aronofsky has gone on like a press tour and like vividly said specifically like, this is what these things represent. There's not a whole lot of mystery about it. So that either leads me to believe that that's exactly what it is, or that there's a lot more to it. Because we know he's like a deep thinker. All of his other movies, there's a lot of other stuff going on, especially The Fountain. There's a lot of other things happening in there. So it's weird to think what the actual intention is, even though he came out and said exactly what his intention is. I almost don't like believe him 100% because it is too literal. It's like going on a press tour for Back to the Future and describing the plot. It's like the plot it's a very simple plot, but it's like you wouldn't have to explain it. So I feel like it's almost the same way with Mother, except that it's not simple. It's the opposite, but it's so much of what it is that's not really hidden at all. So it's very
I was reading some stuff about what Darren Aronofsky was saying, and also just the kind of what I guess speculation from the writers of these articles about it. But based on what I was reading, it almost, what it seemed like, not verbatim obviously, but Darren said, paraphrasing, that like Mother Earth and women and the world at large is going through we're living in a tragedy constantly. Like, our whole world right now is built on tragedy, and we're experiencing tragedy all the time. And a lot of filmmakers or storytellers, and even when it comes to visual representations of the deeper subjects that he's trying to tackle here, it's like he wanted to basically, like, I keep the word, it was like an assault on the senses. He wanted to shock the system, and I'm going to extrapolate what he was trying to say because I don't remember exactly what it was, but in the sense that we can't learn from our mistakes if we don't even remember that we made them. And if we don't recognize the problem, we can't then move beyond that and get into the solution. So I think with the political climate that's going on and just the environmental crisis, all of the crises, which are all connected to a greater crisis that's, permeates through everything. It's like this movie was just like, it was like his attempt to just be like, I want you to see that all the things that you don't want to see for a reason, that this is going on. A lot of times we put our heads in the sand, and that's like got a negative stigma to it sometimes. It's like, these fucking people, they don't even want to, they got their heads in the sand. They're not, watching all the fake news. They don't give a shit. But it's like this movie was by all means, like you said, it's like we got tricked in a way to go see this movie. It's like, here, take a look at what the fuck is going on. Don't look away. Like, this is what's happening. And from recognizing that there is a problem, then we can have some sort of solution, like like a mental illness, really. I mean, like, someone who's insane, truly insane, doesn't realize that they're crazy. So this movie was almost like bringing us up to speed with how crazy things really are and how crazy things have been with all the biblical subtext. But then the fact that it ends and begins in the exact same spot, it's like, this shit's just going to keep continuing over and over again. So, like, what the fuck do you do about it? Like, how the fuck do you deal with this? It's like, maybe there's no answer to that, but he definitely poses the question, like, and that's worth thinking about.
I agree. And he poses it very aggressively, too. I think, like you said, we're used to not really addressing things that are happening culturally or just in the world. And it's easy for us to put our head in the sand or, hide under our beds or whatever you want to use. But things need to be looked at. Like, if you don't talk about something, it's not going to get worked out. And if you don't bring something up, it's not going to happen. Things don't fix themselves typically. So especially big things that are so ingrained in everything that we do and our society and in time, they're too big to be ignored and hope that they go away by themselves. So that's a good way of putting it. It's forcing you to look at the disgusting side, basically, like the gross, all the bad stuff, and it makes you feel those things. Like it kind of grabs you and shakes you and makes you feel these things, in a very aggressive way. Like, they don't ease you into. I mean, they kind of ease you into it, but it's right off the bat. You just feel uneasy, you feel off a little bit, and then it just kind of rams it down your throat and makes you experience it and makes you go through the whole thing. And some people, like you said, walked out. So, like, some people couldn't take it, and I totally understand that. But yeah, this was like some sort of weird medicine that we had to take that just kind of makes you feel sick, but then you puke it out, or then you get it out of your system, or at least now it's there and you can acknowledge it. Don't know what the answer is, but you're right. He definitely put something out there and showed us a picture of ourselves that I don't think that anybody really wanted to see.
Yeah. And with all the climate of shit that's going on, even with the Las Vegas stuff and Florida, I mean, it's always something. Like, there was the Dave Chappelle Netflix special where he was talking about when he was growing up and how, like, when tragedy would happen, shit would be fucked up. But it's like our generation now, it's like every day is a fucking tragedy. It's like we get tragedy in the morning, in the afternoon, and at nighttime. So it's like, it's almost like it become commonplace, and we're jaded to all of the insanity. And so, yeah, Darren Aronofsky with this movie, like, as much as that is the case, builds you up into that thing or you really feel it. And I forgot what I was watching. I mean, it's a million things. You hear this everywhere about, like, it's like Alien Covenant. Like I believe when David says, like, he believes in creation comes from destruction. There's the people that say it's like, well, if you want to build a better world, you have to destroy the other one. And even, like, in astrology, the planet Pluto represents transformation, but you can interpret it as death or rebirth. So it's that cycle. And that's definitely a Darren Aronofsky motif, is having that death and rebirth cycle. But it's like, even in the movie Apocalypse, X-Men Apocalypse in itself shows up and literally believes that, you know, like in order for creation to happen, we need to destroy, like Prometheus, you know, it's like that's creation is built on destruction. And that's like how the movie starts off. The movie starts off at the end where everything's on fire, and then she wakes up and ends up in the same place. But I'm not sure that's exactly, like, I feel like that's definitely an important lesson. It's a reference to the phoenix, basically catching on fire and going into ashes and constantly being reborn. It's this cycle of creation and destruction. But I think, you know, based on watching that movie, it's like this is just a cycle that's going to repeat itself over and over as long as we begin on destruction. If we start with destruction, then we're gonna have the thing will come back to life, but it's always going to be a cycle of destruction. So I think like that lesson's important. Like the Phoenix, yeah, there is creation and destruction, but I feel like there's something to be learned with that. But then maybe we have to let go, because who wants to fucking relive that experience over and over again? Like we don't really want to go back and watch Mother again, you know, right away. It's not something like, oh yeah, well, this is just how creation works. It's all about destruction. Got to feel like shit constantly, you know, because got to wake up, feel like shit again tomorrow. It's like, I don't know if that's the case. And, you know, definitely, I mean, now talking about it, it's like, that's a question that comes up. It's like, is this the way we want to live? Is this the way creation is creation built upon destruction? Or is it our misperception of creation that brings about the destruction?
Yeah, that's fucking heavy. Yeah, maybe it seems like this is the only way because this is the only way that we remember doing it. You know, it's like it's an effective way in some right to end a cycle and begin it through destruction and creation. But I guess that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only way. But what is the other way? You know, like no one's really seen that. No one's really seen like a lot of peaceful resolution or revolution. It usually builds up to something, and then that ends up being chaos or violence or something, and then something has changed from that. But there really aren't that many examples of something not culminating with like an explosion or a metaphoric explosion. So yeah, I think that's the end of the cycle is the most important to lead into the next one. So yeah, if we end up burning the house down again, then it's the next one's just going to start up in the same kind of fashion and then end up burning, like you said, like in destruction and chaos, instead of starting in a new different way. Like we don't know really what that is. And I think that is kind of this opportunity at the time, right now, like before, when we were going to have this talk a week ago, you brought up maybe talking about 2012, and I feel like that's kind of like the symbolism of what 2012 was, even though it's already happened, was the opportunity to go into a new age differently, I think, you know, because we hear about, you know, looking into mythology and whatnot, and like hearing about the 5 or 6 apocalypses that have already happened, like in the world restarting, basically, which is kind of like what Mother was about in one way. It was like the end. And then Jennifer Lawrence even says at one point, okay, I'll go get back on the apocalypse, or I'll get back working on the apocalypse, or something along those lines. She even mentions it, working on the apocalypse. So, and the other definition of apocalypse is the lifting of the veil or revealing of something. So it doesn't necessarily mean everything blowing up, but so I think the different interpretation of apocalypse, or the end of something, it doesn't have to be, you know, because we're at this point, we're self-fulfilling most of our prophecies. It's like, well, this is just how it happens. I guess it's happening, you know, oh, he hit the launch button, I guess I got to hit the launch button. Or it's like, you know, it just seems like it's kind of like, well, we have no choice right now. It's like the countdown to in Watchmen, like the count, I don't know if it's a clock to the apocalypse or whatever, but it's just like, oh, it's inevitable. The apocalypse is going to happen. It's going to be nuclear war. It's going to be mass destruction. You know, 90% of the people are going to die. It's just like, that's just kind of how it is. And that seems like that's the perspective. It's like nobody's surprised. Oh, well, Donald Trump and North Korea and all this stuff, I guess that's just happening now. So I guess this is our lives. And everyone just kind of is accepting it because that's all we've seen in movies, Terminator, like just the dystopia, it's coming. Everyone's like, great, okay, we might as well accept it. Here it comes. Like every time there's a new development in technology or a new thing, it's just kind of like, all right, well, here we go. Nothing we can do about it. Just on this roller coaster and can't change anything about it. And I think Mother in 2012 and other things like that, The Fountain was like this in its own way, but Mother more particularly was like, this is what's happening. Like, see it. It didn't really offer an opportunity for change, but it is a very good self-awareness moment. Like, look at what's happening. Like, look at what's happening. We don't have to, if we're going to accept it, okay, just know that this is what it is. You know, don't pretend like it's something else. Like Mother was like, it's not pretty, you know, it's a beautiful Mother Earth and it's a beautiful old house, but like what's happening in here is not pretty. It doesn't look good. And we need to address that. We can't just let it go. And if we do, we have to know that this is how it's going to be. We can't pretend, we can't lie to ourselves that it's going to be a nice thing or whatever. Gotta be real with ourselves. And I think that is what Mother was. It's like, come on, man, like be real, like stop lying to yourself, basically.
Yeah. A lot of the references you're talking about, like 2012 and even with, you know, these like apocalyptic dystopian movies, the one that definitely resonated with everything you were saying there was The Matrix and the whole concept of choice and how like the architect and Neo coming into the architect's office and being like, it's like, we're going to destroy Zion. It's inevitable. We've done it before. We'll do it again. You're not even the first Neo. And what is the whole thing? And like Oracle tells Neo, it's like, you didn't come here to make the choice. You came here to understand why you made the choice. Meaning that this is going to happen whether you like it or not, because you already made that choice. You have to understand why it happened. And like in terms of Mother, the whole thing in the very beginning after the, you know, crazy fire scene, Javier Bardem looking all creepy with that like crystal, like pine cone looking shard of glass that he puts into the thing, and then the entire house comes back to life, and you're like, what the fuck is that? And he's all like creepy about it and like, don't touch it, don't touch my crystal. And then you find out that it was Jennifer Lawrence's heart, like, and that's a direct reference to like in The Fountain, I mean not The Fountain, Noah, with the Tree of Life, when Russell Crowe's explaining to this family like about creation and how it all happened, and then they go to the Garden of Eden, and you see the, instead of an apple on the tree, it's a beating heart, and Eve takes the apple and eats the apple, which is like taking like life. And there was that reference of like, you know, it's once we got violent, that's when things started to happen. It was like all we take. So kind of stitching it back to The Matrix again, what was the whole point of that? If Neo didn't come here to make the choice, or in this situation, take the red pill, it's like, you already took the red pill. You got to understand why you took the red pill. And ultimately it's like, no matter, you can't go back and take the blue pill, or you can't keep taking more red pills. Ultimately, you're just taking. I'm just keep taking. And that's like in Darren Aronofsky's theme. It's like you're taking from the Tree of Life, or you're taking from Mother Earth. And that's what Javier Bardem does at the end of the movie after it's all done. And she's just like, you took everything from me. Just finish it. I think she might have even said that, like, just fucking take it. And he takes the heart, and then it's the beginning of the movie again. So the whole thing came from him taking her heart, and like creation coming from taking the life from something else, like fucking Deer Hunter, one life for another. You know, it's like one life for another, one life for another. It's like, how is that creating anything? There is really no creation in that respect. All you're doing is just like moving energy. You're changing energy. So, you know, so it's like ultimately, if Javier Bardem, which is definitely the patriarchal male god in the, like, you know, from the Old Testament, who literally just was all fire and brimstone and wanted you to obey him and no questions asked, otherwise we'll bring the house down and destroy it. It's like, well, what if it wasn't about taking altogether? What if he didn't take that fucking heart? What if Javier Bardem went, like, learned something in the end? You know, because he didn't really fucking learn anything. He was just on his own, like, power trip from all of the worshipers and followers that were doing everything based on his poetry. So that was just really interesting. It's like, maybe as a possible solution, it's like, even back to The Matrix, it's not about what you take, it's about what you give back. What do you put back? Maybe we've taken enough.
Yeah, that's I think about that often. Well, not often enough, I guess, but it, like when we were at that, when you lived up in Crestone and there was that Buddhist, what did you call it, like up on the hill?
Stupa.
Yeah, and people, you'd leave stuff there, right? Like a good luck charm or something like that. I remember thinking about that because every time I go somewhere, I try to like, I'll pick up a pine cone or a little stick or something, you know, like if I go on somewhere that I've never been or just somewhere where I'm having an experience and I want a little trophy, basically. Just like I keep taking. I have all these little pine cones and rocks and all these things, but I'm like, the idea of leaving something instead is like more, it's liberating because you're letting go of things, but also like more exciting in a completely different way. Like you're giving something up to something else. Yeah, you're still hoping for good things to happen, but instead of like taking from something else and being like, yeah, this is mine now, this is going to make me better or give me more luck or give me better whatever, you know, because I took something from something else. It's like giving feels great, you know, most of the time. So the idea of giving something away instead of taking it, I think we're learning that harshly right now about the environment and all the things that we've been taking out. And you know, there's a lot of people out there like trying to plant trees and forests, and like that's a movement into itself. But at the rate we're doing it, it's very hard to do it on a community level. It needs to be done like an industrial level. But yeah, that's like the definition of our problems right now is like we're running out of resources because we're just taking and taking and taking and taking too much until there's nothing left. It's like the giving tree too. You know, he gives everything, all of his branches, all of his limbs, and then his trunk, and then he's like, I got nothing left to give, but you can still sit on my stump if you want to. That's all I have left. And that's kind of what happened with Jennifer Lawrence. She's like, I've given everything. And then he's like, well, you still got the one thing. Then he's just like, okay, you know, just take it, I guess. And that just seems like the kind of road that we're on right now is like, we'll just keep taking at least that aspect of society, that mentality of how things need to work with oil and just coal and just like the old way of doing things. Yeah, it's worked for the most part, but it always had a deadline to it. It was always going to end at some point, and it was going to get sooner and sooner and sooner, but like they didn't want to worry about it. You know, like you talk about, the Chinese think about things in 500-year increments, whereas in the United States, they think of it in probably at most 5-year increments. You know, it's like, okay, well now, or if it's the president, it's like, oh, we'll worry for the next guy, and the next president will worry about this, and that's only in however much time. So yeah, our perspective on time and our perspective on how we've been treating things, it's not really real to me. I'm not like experiencing these things personally. Yeah, global warming, I'm sure it's hotter or colder or it's raining more or whatever, but the difference isn't that great to me at the moment. So it's easy for me to kind of ignore it or not let it in. But I think that's part of what filmmakers do and what Darren Aronofsky is doing, and just the idea we need to get in our head that things are happening and they're not good looking, and we need to change the mentality of how we're doing things. We need to approach things differently. I'm not exactly sure how. We're working on it, but things need to be looked at differently. Yeah. Otherwise, there's the time is running out, as they say, like for sure.
And it'll just keep happening this way. We'll just keep suffering and suffering and suffering the more we take and take and take. And you brought the giving tree. There's also Hugh Jackman's tree from The Fountain, because that's literally what he was doing the whole time in the future. He was like, you know, meditating, going back in time, and then he would like go over to that tree and take a little piece of bark off and eat it, and then go back in time again. And he was doing this over and over again, thinking he needed to finish it, and it was all about him. It was, I mean, he fooled himself into thinking that he was trying to save Rachel Weisz's character, but really it was all about his inability to let go of everything, which is what she was trying to tell him pretty much the whole time, because she was like, I'm going to die, like, and she accepted it. It was him that didn't. And there was that scene where like everything at the, like, it's Darren Aronofsky's fucking ending scenes. Like the last 10 minutes of every Aronofsky movie is like, you know, the craziest 10 minutes you'll see in a movie. And that part, like, when shit finally hits the fan and Rachel Weisz dies on the hospital bed, and like cut to the future, and Hugh Jackman turns around and the tree shrivels up and he runs over and he's like, no, 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 like, oh no. And it's like, yeah, the tree's fucking dead. Like, and it's fact is, it's like that tree is going to be reborn, but it's not about the tree. It's like, you're going to be the new tree. You need to let go. And it wasn't. And then what ended up kind of getting that whole thing to re-blossom again was about him in the future leaving that bubble, leaving his bubble of influence, and then giving himself the ring. So he let that ring go from one part of himself, gave it to the other part of himself, and then that's what allowed him to die. And I think that's like a huge, like me, I was talking about this with a friend of mine last night, in terms of like, we're having this crazy conversation about Atlantis and ancient civilizations and stuff, and we're just in like full shaman mode, being like, you know what, I think people today in this day and age, compared to like maybe 10, 15,000 years ago, today people are more afraid and confused about the concept of death in itself than like ever before. Like if you were to go back like 20,000 years ago, I think our perception of death and what the afterlife was, or the way we handled all that, was different. We're much more afraid of all that, or we're afraid to let go, because all we know is taking. All we know is taking. We've been on this fucking journey. Death is the road to awe. So it's like, once we fucking get into that point and we learn to give back, that's at the end of the movie, The Fountain. What does he do? He plants the seed for the tree. And he's like, goodbye, Izzy. And that's the end of the movie. It's like, it's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. Like it's not like we're going to nest, like you were saying about the trees, like unless we do it on an industrial massive scale, like, I mean, who's even to say that that's going to make a difference? Like, there are very prominent scientists that say within the next 50 years, there's nothing we could do about it. There's going to be no fish left in the ocean. And the pollution's going to be so bad. And it's like, all of this shit's going to fucking happen, whether we like it or not. But it's about trying to take a step back and see, okay, well, how did we get to this point? We can't necessarily change the past, but maybe it's not about changing the past. Maybe it's just more about changing ourselves and changing the way we see this whole thing. And by letting go, that's where the rebirth can happen. But that's literally a veil that, we metaphorically have to go through our own inner apocalypses to go through. Like, you won't be able to get through that veil, or that veil will not dissolve and fall down unless you give up everything that you are and accept things as they are. And Mother was the greatest challenge to fucking come to that realization, because it's so gut-wrenching and horrible. And you're just like, yeah, like we were saying before, it's like some people just were walking out of the movie because they couldn't handle it. But, I admire Darren Aronofsky for many reasons, but to be able to hold people, accountable to something like that, when most times Hollywood just wants to entertain and distract you, especially in these times, it was fucking intense, man.
Yeah, that was the opposite of entertaining and distracting. It was like we were talking about, it's probably the worst movie you could watch, like after something terrible like Las Vegas happened. Like, other movies, Transformers, or I'm really looking forward to the next Thor movie coming out. Like, you go to the movie for 2.5, probably fucking almost 3 hours now. You're just like, okay, this is nice, a nice escape. Lots of pretty colors, pretty lights, bunch of pretty girls, funny guys saying stupid shit and punching the guy really hard in the face, or the Hulk kicking somebody to the moon. It's just like, this is great. Yeah, I don't have to worry about anything else. But like, I learned about the Vegas shooting like right before I went and saw Mother last night. It was like the worst movie you could possibly, one of the worst experiences you could have, as far as like watching something or taking something in after a tragedy, because it didn't distract me from anything. It didn't put me at ease. It didn't make me feel comfortable or happy or anything. I laughed a couple of times because it was so absurd, but it like made me feel more than I felt before, rather than numbing me and making me feel less and not making me think about stuff. This made me think more, and it made me feel more. And then it made me think more about the thing that happened in Vegas, instead of making me distracted from it. It just kind of compounded, and they were like of the same element. So it was overwhelming. It was really overwhelming, and it wasn't a break from anything. It was more an intensity of reality than it was a break from reality. So fuck him for doing that to me. What an asshole.
Yeah, and I I know, it's like you're the only person that I've after seeing Mother, I was like, so I told everyone, like, yeah, you should see Mother, and everyone's like, I don't know, dude. And I'm like, I'm not like, strongly advocating to see it, but like you're the only other person I know that's seen it and like can say that, and that's the thing. It's almost like I want people to see it just so that I can have like a sense that you feel a shared, like, you fucking saw that too. Like, it was awful. Like, I don't regret telling you. See, I know you're gonna see it anyway, but yeah, that's like it was a very unique film that really opened up your eyes, Clockwork Orange style, and you know, you had to take it all in, and it wasn't exactly fun.
No, it did. It felt like a chore, you know. After a while, it was like, fuck, I just got to get through this, you know, like a long acid trip or something like that. You're like 8 hours in, and you're just like, fuck, I'm gonna get through this. You know, yeah. But it just, after, you know, I went into it because this is my favorite director, and I love going to see his movies, and I'm like excited about it, even though I was unsure about how it was gonna go. Yeah, and then probably within a half hour in, I was just like, God damn it, like, this is not letting up right now, and I need to make it through. I just need to like clench in and make it through. I had to go to the bathroom a couple times and take a few sips of my beer, but I was like, all right, now I'm in it. I gotta like work. I had to work hard to get all the way through the movie. Yeah, it was less a movie experience than it was like some sort of fucked up therapy I felt like I was getting.
Yeah, like what you said before, is like it was like a medicine that didn't taste good, but we needed it. You know, like one of the really cool things I love about Darren Aronofsky is his affinity towards the mystical, ancient, like Kabbalistic, alternative, Gnostic kind of. He's got a very strong spiritual understanding of things, and he's been like, in the movie Pi, it was the most expositional it was, like when he's going to meet the rabbi and like to get the microchips and shit, and they're just like telling him about the Kabbalah and what the Jewish mystics are all about. So the whole thing with what I'm trying to say is that like there's an alternate way that the Gnostic or the early Christian way of looking at all of this information was. In the Bible as we know it, or we've been programmed to believe in Genesis, with the fall from grace and Adam and Eve and all that stuff, it's basically, the narrative goes like, okay, God put you in this situation and tempted you and told you not to do it, and you did it anyway, and you got fucking banished for it. It's humans' fault things are all fucked like this, and specifically women's fault. Eve was the one that ate the fucking apple. She didn't eat that fucking apple, like everything would have been fine, right? Well, that's the traditional Christian way of looking at it. But Darren Aronofsky taps into the Gnostic way of understanding this, and the Essenes and these kind of older, more ancient Christian ways of looking at it, the pagan way of looking at it, if you will, the nature-based way. The nature-based way has an earlier part of the whole, like an early chapter before all that stuff, that, without getting too much into the details of it, basically says the opposite. It's that instead of humankind fucking up creation, it's that the creator or the Lord actually fucked up. It wasn't Eve and Adam that fucked up by making that choice. It was the creator or the Lord that set up a false choice to begin with, and that's what set everything all fucking out of control. And that was changed over the course of hundreds of years in the Bible, because it basically, you know, the church liked it that the people were the guilty ones. Therefore, the church can charge them and get them to come and confess and give them money. If it was the church and God that fucked up, well, then how can you justify any of the shit that you're doing? So Darren Aronofsky is totally aware of all this stuff, based on the very direct references sometimes in his movies, and then also the subtext, like even in the movie Noah, to be able to portray the fallen angels in a way that, okay, maybe they were not bad. Maybe they were good guys that fucked up, and ultimately they're the ones that helped Noah in the end. So that's the different kind of spin on it, was that the Lord fucked up. And then in this movie Mother, that's very much like Javier Bardem. Like, he's the fucking, you know, he's the God, but he's not a benevolent God. He's a very much accurate depiction of this fire and brimstone God that, like, if he wasn't such an asshole who was so full of himself, only into what he wanted, maybe this wouldn't have fucking happened that way. So it's like, to force people to see it that way, it's like, yeah, guys, wake up to the fucking truth. It's like, we've been lied to about how we came to be, in this situation. And the only way we're going to get out of it is if we fucking acknowledge it. We can't fucking keep starting on the wrong foot so much. It's like Darren Aronofsky just like literally punching you in the face like the entire time, mother, and just like, and then like Japanese torture, like throughout in the beginning of the movie, just like tapping you on the forehead. And you're just like, stop.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing, that's for sure. And they've worked with the same crew, as far as I know, sound-wise and lighting-wise and cinematography-wise for his whole career. So they know what they're doing and how to evoke things in you and how to make you tick and tweak and just feel real uneasy. And you just, when you were talking about the perspective of the creator also having human attributes, basically, like, you know, putting God as Javier Bardem is like a very unique idea as well, you know, because it's like the all-knowing, all-seeing, whatever God, like, can do no harm. So like he said that you were born with original sin, so therefore your life is born under original sin, so you're forever in debt to him, and he's the best of the best, and he looks like Santa Claus. And it was just like, that's always been the way, and don't question it. And if you do, you're, you know, a number of things you're labeled as, and you're outcast from society. But to give God like a humanity was very, very unique. And to say that they could mess up, you know, that there is room for them to not make a perfect world, you know, like something started wrong, or maybe we should look at it, the person who created this is not really a God. Somebody like David from the Alien movie, you know, like Michael Fassbender. It's like, he is a God, but he's not the God. He's not all-knowing and all-seeing, and he clearly has a lot of flaws. Like Javier Bardem clearly was vain and couldn't see anything else and loved everything about that was about him. So I've never really thought about the idea of God like fucking up. I've always thought about like there being a creation, then somebody coming in and tainting it and kind of changing the dials, or however Anthony Green put it, reset our dials all wrong. So had the idea of maybe that like the creator had something to do with it. I just got this visual of like just a God-looking figure just taking the apple and rolling it right in front of Adam and Eve and go, I bet you won't do it. I bet you won't do it. Like, I feel like that's how the world started. And he's like,
yeah, totally.
Right away, you're fucked. You're fucked.
Yep, totally set up. And the in the Gnostic form of story of creation, there's I'll probably butcher it a little bit, but the whole thing is like there are these emanations and these stories of like angels and how everything's balanced. So for every time there's a new emanation of creation, that's a cool band name or song, perhaps, Emanation of Creation. There's a male and female balance to it. So like once the light, like if you want to imagine like a prism, and when you shine light through the prism and it refracts and turns into the rainbow frequencies, like imagine this situation, you shine light through a prism and then you get a breakdown into two, one male and one female. And then it's fractals. So then those each go through another prism and create male and female. And that, according to the Gnostic tradition of creation, this happens in a series of, you know, going through prisms. But this is where, you know, shit makes sense in the Gnostic understanding, because at one point when the light was going through one of these spectrums, the male and female kind of didn't come out evenly enough, and the female basically like didn't come out all the way. Like the female went and did its own thing. So if you imagine it like spheres within spheres, and every time you go through, like these two beings come into the sphere, but imagine when this sphere was created, only the male came in and the female stayed on the outside. And this is what in the Gnostic understanding is where what they call the demiurge. We live in that final sphere. Like after the light comes through and through all these prisms, at the very bottom level, which is the world we live in, the female aspect never made it in. And the male aspect stayed in and became known what is called the demiurge. And this is basically a false god who makes people believe in this world, since people are so far away from the original light beyond the spectrum of all these prisms, basically. People in this world look up and see a god. They see Santa Claus up there, and it's like, oh, I got to worship him. I got to obey him. But he's not really a god. He's the demiurge. So like in the modern Christian thing, it's really like the devil. It's instead of the devil being below us in its own region called hell, the world we live in is like the Matrix. Okay, we look up and see God, but that's really the devil, and it's the female energy. It's called a Sophia, actually. That's like the name. Anyone can look this up and look up Gnosis or Gnostic Sophia understandings. And it's all about this like divine feminine getting left out of the final level of creation, and all these people living in a matrix of deception, thinking that God is this, hierarchical man figure, this patriarchal guy. But really that wasn't the case. So like Javier Bardem in this, in the context of that, is that demiurge. Like you said, it's like, even though God, you would think is an omnipotent, all-knowing force of bestowing in creation, that's definitely not what Javier Bardem was at all. He was more like what we consider to be like, an asshole dude. So it's like, maybe the ancient chapter of history, maybe like the God and the creation was like, there's more to it. There's a whole other chapter that involved like ancient aliens maybe, or, something like that. It's like, we got confused and saw God as a human, and we got it confused.
Yeah, that's very understandable. But there's just some things that we just can't question. You can't talk about that. You can't be like, well, what if that wasn't the case? Especially with things so old, like the Bible. It's like the Bible is the Bible. It's nothing else is like it. Everybody knows what it is. It's just like the unquestionable thing, even though it's so ridiculous and so old, and just like all those the creation myths, even though there's still no one can prove any of it, but like trying to disprove it or talk negatively about it still in the year 2017, talking about the idea of a big white dude up in the sky. Like literally people think that. It's just like, and then we're not allowed to even ask, does that make sense? Or was there more to it? Like without being perceived in a negative way, or just like you're a crazy person. It's just, so we have to make these kind of movies that address things almost like secretly, like we're talking about when we talk about Mandala. It's like, it's not going to be up front. Like the story is a great story in itself, and we'll hide everything else in the quality of the story itself and the characters and everything that happens. But we still have to hide stuff in there to get these ideas across to people, because it's not something that we could directly address without getting outed. Like anybody who talks about anything directly in the mainstream is not looked at, like they're a regular person. Their perceptions about them, people make up stories about them or just try to separate them from the normal people. And that's like, they make it not okay to, even though like no one's going to get imprisoned or tortured like maybe they would have 100 years ago, or they do in other countries, but they're still going to like make sure that people think that that's not okay to talk about these things or question these things. And as artists, we're forced to make movies like Darren Aronofsky made that are not directly, but this one is so direct a metaphor. I think it's almost like a fuck you that we have to keep talking in code, but I'm going to put this thing so far in your face that you have to see it for something else. So I guess that's encouraging for the idea that we can start making more direct movies, questioning these bigger ideas, but we still have to pretty much talk in art code, and people have to interpret stuff instead of having actual conversations about this shit that doesn't make sense, which is a lot of shit. People base their lives on these things that this God or this religion that are just so outrageous. Yet if I were to present them an idea that's way, way, way more scaled down, but something a little bit different than what they're used to, that would be crazy to them. But thinking of their God floating in the sky and smiting these people and killing these people and giving this person a baby and like just doing all these personal things, that's not far-fetched. But thinking about the world a little bit differently than we've thought about it is insane to these people. So yeah, that's a tough crowd.
I mean, yeah, even in when the movie Noah came out, it was a huge controversy around it, and they actually they banned it in many countries for some specific reasons, one of them being that they never used the word God in the movie Noah. Anytime they referred to what we consider to be God, it was always the creator. And that like pissed off like a lot of people, like a lot of really staunch religious people in the monotheistic religions. I mean, they banned it in most Islamic countries, and then they like Christians and Jews specifically were just like, you didn't mention God, like that's a blasphemy. Well, it's like back to what the whole thing was. It's like, well, maybe that was the point. Maybe this wasn't, it wasn't a God, you know, that we're talking. It's like when we got to break it down, it's like the difference between a God and a creator. These are questions that come up, and Darren Aronofsky has been a pioneer of really speaking in code and going off on the deep end and challenging our thinking on all sorts of levels like that. And it's like super important. It's one of the big reasons I know both of us really admire his films as much as they are fucking head trips and disturbing.
Yeah, because you could tell that there's more going on, and there were things that we could relate to, or at least things that we have similar thoughts and views about. Like with The Fountain, you know, that was a great one for our first one to talk about of his films. It was perfect because that was things we were very, very interested in, and just the idea and the images and the music again. It was just, and you know, there was so much more going on there, and that was always the exciting part. Besides the fact that, you know, everything looked beautiful and it was a really cool idea. It's like, what else? You know, what is the really, really symbolic meaning behind all these huge symbols that were in the movie, and that were just like we were both getting just interested in that kind of stuff at the same time, and dealing with time and alternate realities and the future and the past. I remember you basically taught me about time using The Fountain as a tool, like a reference point. Like, well, remember how this thing happened here, and then these were all linked. And I remember like literally not thinking about time the same after we saw the movie independently, and then that you kind of gave me your perspective on it. It really kind of opened up my mind, and along with you being great and having this tool, it's like a medium for me to understand things and a reference point. I was able to learn a lot from that movie besides filmmaking. So that's why we love him as a director, because there's so much more to it. They're not just popcorn for the eyes. There's like substance for the soul and for everything else that we have going on that we need to develop in. It's just so replenishing, I guess, and nutritious for our like artistic well-being. It helps us go, and it always gets so inspired. Like, even though I'm not going to see Mother again, hopefully not, Jesus, it really inspired the shit out of me. You know, I already started like getting ideas and getting the creative juices flowing. So even if I don't like feel about the movie like I do all of his other movies, it still has provided me with a lot of good stuff for my life and for my creative endeavors as well. So it's incredible.
Yeah, it is. Darren Aronofsky, if you're watching this, love you, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for doing all that stuff.
Yeah. Now on that note, I think we'll probably call it an hour, right?
Yeah, just about, I think, yeah. I was just going to say that I read that Darren Aronofsky wrote that script in 5 days for Mother, by the way.
Really? Oh, that's funny, because apparently the working title for that movie before Mother was called The Sixth Day.
Maybe that's why, I guess I didn't think about that. Maybe he had a motivation to finish it in 5 or under a week because of the days of creation. But yeah, that's interesting. That just blew my mind. It's like, what have I done the last 5 days? This fucking guy wrote.
Right. Oh my God. What an insane movie. Yeah, Javier Bardem. I don't even really know what that movie was about. I don't even really speak English. Made a lot of sense.
He just looks like a demon to me. He's perfect. Even though it's like a friendly demon, he just looks, can't get that No Country for Old Men like persona out of whenever I see his face. I'm just like, ugh, no.
Have you seen the new Pirates of the Caribbean?
No, I don't think I have.
He's in that. He plays one of like the antagonists, but again, very creepy, just like as a ghost admiral, like fighting pirates, and it's just the way they did the effects in the water and just drooling black ooze and walking around the peg leg, and it's like, yeah, Javier Bardem definitely killing it.
Also, one quick thing from the movie. Skylar didn't see it, but when Javier Bardem's like photograph was on the floor and it was kind of ripped up into pieces, and I think it was facing the opposite direction from us. I swear to God, I saw he had horns. Like he was like somebody sketched John horns on him, but I got no confirmation on that. So that was also interesting.
Makes perfect sense with everything we've discussed. Yeah. The ultimate twist ending. The good guy is the bad guy.
And the babies are dead.
Yep. Oh my God, that was so fucked up. Yeah. Well, we'll see how it goes from here. Maybe we'll learn. Maybe the next Darren Aronofsky, maybe he'll like remake the Neverending Story or something.
Yeah, or he'll end it.
Or he'll fucking finish the Neverending Story. That would make a lot of sense, actually. Finish it. Just Darren Aronofsky on the Neverending Story. Finish it. I can't finish it.
Nothing would surprise me from him. So I definitely look forward to every one of his films from the future. I hope that we get some music in the next one. I kind of missed that from this movie, but it was effective. But yeah, I'm excited about everything he does. So hopefully he keeps them rolling, and maybe he gives kind of an answer to the question that he posed in this movie. Maybe he gives us an answer the next time around. Can only hope.
Yeah, maybe he'll finally give us something instead of taking our souls away bit by bit. It's totally what I feel like he does sometimes with his movies. Takes a little bit of my soul every time. But yeah, we'll see. You know, that's definitely a sign of the times, and really looking forward to seeing how things come about from this and what we could give back from this whole thing. It's like, what do you take from that experience other than just like, you know, shock and awe? You know, again, another theme of the whole thing is maybe it's not about what we take. Like in the movie Noah, when his kid goes to take a flower and he's like, Russell Crowe comes up, he's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "It's a pretty flower. And he's like, "Look, we only take what we need." And it's like, that kid was forever traumatized by all that shit he was doing. But still, the lesson is kind of important. Even though Russell Crowe didn't really learn it and was kind of teaching it prematurely to his children, it's like, okay, well, maybe we need to plant some seeds. And even with all the terrible shit that's going on in the world right now, it's all about what we can give back and what we can take from this. And we're kind of talking about before, you know, usually crazy shit happens and immediately people get divisive, and what can we use this for? And I mean, I'm sure there are people thinking about it and talking about it, but I was a little bit surprised in a good way that it wasn't immediately, okay, let's start talking about the gun issue. Okay, let's start talking about, like, you know, doing crazy security at hotels. Like, obviously people are afraid and want to do something about it, but maybe it's a good sign that people are not immediately like trying to do something, and they're just being with it and reflecting on the tragedy. It's like, how did this happen? We can't make sense of it right away. But it's just like all of Darren Aronofsky's movies. We can't always make sense of it right away. Just got to finish the movie, walk away, you know, go to sleep, have a nightmare or two, and, you know, wake up and make some changes.
Exactly. Just to be human for a little bit, I think, you know, without worrying about all that other stuff or overwhelming yourself with everything else. Just be, like you said, be human. Be whatever you're feeling, and yeah, sleep it off, walk it off. And every time something like this happens, it's always, as fucked up as it is, it's an opportunity for things to happen positively as well as negatively. So if we want to focus on gun control and stricter laws about this and that, or if we want to focus on being better humans, I think the opportunity is there for both. So hopefully something good will come out of this somehow.
Yeah, maybe that'll just be us going, death is the road to awe. Just going through, just leaving our bubble and floating in Indian style meditative to the floating light, and, you know, seeing what happens. No expectations on what's going to happen.
Exactly. That's the best way to go out.
Awesome, brother. Well, it was a pleasure. It's always a pleasure talking with you, and we will do another one as soon as we can. I'll get this up and running most likely either later tonight or tomorrow morning. But for everyone out there listening, you can check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and all that shit, you know, just hashtag here and there. Chris, I'm going to make this the freeze frame with Chris, maybe, you know. But hell yeah, man. Love you, dude. I'm glad you're good. Look forward to seeing you soon. And is a good synchronistic. I feel like I just left Milwaukee.
Yeah, man. You're here again in the future at some point. But yeah, thanks for having me on. Good talk. We'll talk again. Love you. Always appreciate seeing your fuzzy face. Let the parents know I say hello and all the pups and stuff like that. But yeah, we'll talk again soon. Thanks, man.
All right, brother. I'll talk to you soon. Yeah, Thor says goodbye too.
Bye, Thor.
Later.